strong academic leadership of the chief organizer, Honorable Principal Dr. M. Ambedkar, sir. So I welcome you on behalf of the organizing committee of International E-Conference, Sri Kumaraswamy College, Ausa, as the chairperson and presiding authority of today's International E-Conference. Today I feel immense pleasure to welcome Honorable Dignitary, Chief Guest and Keynote Speaker, Matta Ma'am from Beirut, Governorate, Lebanon. Honorable Keynote Speaker is going to enrich and enlighten us on the topic Communicative Competence and Learning. Now, I would like to invite Honorable Chief Organizer, Principal Dr. M. Ambedkar, sir, for his opening remarks about today's International E-Conference and the chief guest. Please, sir, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction. Can I start now? Okay. Before I dive into the topic, I'd like to take a moment to extend my warm welcome to everyone who has joined us and to say thanks to Dr. Ambedkar. I'm going to tackle one of the most important topics in the 21st century. It is communicative competence, which refers exactly to the ability to use a language effectively for communication in various contexts and situations. Why communicative competence? First of all, it has a great influence on language learning. For example, its integration into learning a language, whether L1, L2, L3, involves creating opportunities for learners to develop their abilities to use the language effectively in real-life situations. Second, which I consider very important, is that in today's globalized world, effective communication is required in various contexts. such as business, education, social interactions, and more. Third, it represents the gradual development of education, especially when it underscores the importance of mastering grammar and being to interact meaningfully and fluently with others. You know, nowadays, unfortunately, many language learners struggle with speaking fluently, despite having a good grasp of grammar rules. Thus, it's a great challenge to them. So, in my presentation, I will provide insights into why this happens and offer strategies to overcome this challenge. In the content of my presentation, I will tackle the following. First of all, I will speak about competence and performance. I will define each one separately. Then, I'm going to move to communicative competence. I'm going to refer to different notions speaking about communicative competence. Another point, I'm going to speak about the components of communicative competence in terms of grammatical competence, sociolinguistic competence, discourse competence, and strategic competence. So let's start with the first one, competence and performance. You know, we have to speak about the differences between competence and performance. But let me first of all speak about McNeil's definition about competence and performance. According to him, competence and performance are fundamental to understanding language. But let's define competence first of all. Competence refers to an individual's knowledge of the language, including the rules and structures that govern it. This encompasses the ability to generate and understand grammatically correct sentences. When I say grammatically correct sentences, you have to focus on the syntax of the language, the rules, the principles that govern the structure of sentences in a language. It deals with how words are arranged to form phrases, clauses, and sentences. You know, you have many types of sentences like compound, complex, simple sentences, and so on. So I can say that syntax encompasses various aspects, including word order, sentence structure, grammatical relationships between words, and the formation of meaningful units within a sentence. As for performance, it relates to the actual use of language in real life situations. So we are going to focus on real life situations. So it's not enough to learn the rules of the language, but also we have to know how to use the language in real life situations. That is, using in the language in various contexts, taking into consideration the situation, the audience, the purpose of communication. So, performance not only involves grammatical correctness, but also factors that contribute to successful communication in real-life situations. To make it simpler for us, competence and performance cannot go separately. They have to go together. I cannot say competence is more important than performance. Both of them are important because they are linked together. Now, since performance focuses a lot on the use of language in real-life situations, let me give you examples of real-life situations. I'm going to speak about verbal communication, non-verbal or written communication, and non-verbal communication. So I'm going to speak about three aspects: verbal communication, written communication, and non-verbal communication. Verbal communication, we have the learners have to know how to use the spoken language to converse in different contexts, such as work meetings, social gatherings, everyday interactions. So learners have to know how to choose the correct words and phrases, in addition to the use of correct intonation, emphasis, and the tone to convey the meaning effectively. Written communication Learners have to know how to communicate through written language. That is, they have to know how to write emails, text, post, other written forms. So the learners reveal their language performance by using correct grammar and punctuation and adapting the style to the intended audience and purpose. So it's not enough to say, I know how to write the language properly, but you have to use it according to certain context. For example, if I am writing to a businessman, to my friends, etc., so the language should differ. The language words, etc., should differ. Nonverbal communication, here we have to focus on facial expressions, body language, gestures, eye contact to complement and reinforce the verbal messages. So real life situations is very, we mean that language performance in real life situations involves the dynamic use of verbal and non-verbal communication skills to interact with others, convey our ideas, speak about our information, and achieve various communicative goals effectively. So, McNeil's distinction between competence and performance emphasizes the difference between what speakers know about the language and how they use it in practice. So he didn't speak alone about competence and he didn't speak alone about performance. He said both of them are very important and we have to know how. We have to know the language and how to use it in practice. So competence represents the idealized knowledge of language. Therefore, the learner has to know the system of rules that a language user should master, we call it competence, while performance reflects the dynamic application of that knowledge in everyday communication. So performance, again, encompasses the ability to understand and interpret spoken and written language as the ability to produce language effectively in various contexts. So performance in a second language is not only determined by linguistic accuracy, but also by the ability to convey meaning clearly and appropriately, taking into account communication strategies. So, after speaking about competence and performance, now I have to proceed to define communicative competence. Many linguists have different notions about communicative competence. For example, Cannelli and Swain understood communicative competence as a mixture of an underlying system of knowledge and skills needed for communication. So the task is to work on communication. Communicative competence is relevant to all languages a person may learn or use. So I'm not going to say communicative competence is only related to English language. It's related to all languages you are going to learn, maybe French, maybe Indian language, Arabic, whatever. So exactly, it encompasses the skills and knowledge necessary to understand and produce language to communicate successfully, regardless of the definite language being learned or used. Himes defined communicative competence not only as grammatical competence, but also as the ability to use grammatical competence in a variety of communication situations. So, Himes believes that communication in a speech event is closely related to factors outside the language, called as metalingual. That is, where to speak the language, when to speak the language, who the speaker, the opponent, the content of the utterance, the purpose of the speech, the intonation of the speech, all of these have to be taken into consideration. So it's not enough to learn the grammatical rules, but we have to know how to use the language in different settings. So Himes focuses on 3 points: grammatical competence, which I'm going to speak about later, the ability to use grammatical competence in different communicative situations, and the last one, sociolinguistic perspective. So I will discuss now ability to use competence in different communication situations and sociolinguistic perspective. Okay. Concerning the first one, the ability to use grammatical competence in different communicative situations. Here, Himes emphasizes that language is not just a means of communication, but also a social tool that individuals use in various social contexts. So, it's good to say that I know the language, I know how to communicate, but we have to take into consideration different social contexts. How to use language in a professional settings. For example, learners have to use the language to negotiate contracts, communicate business strategies effectively. For example, within family relations, language serves as a means to express love, resolve conflicts, and pass down cultural traditions from one generation to another. In educational environments, here we have students, we have teachers. So language is used by teachers to convey knowledge and by students to participate in classroom discussions and collaborate on group projects. For example, during social gatherings, dinners, parties, language here facilitates introducing people to each other, telling stories, speaking about their experiences. Now, as for sociolinguistic perspective, let me give you some examples. We have to know how to choose the right words in certain situations. For example, our words should be chosen according to the audience, according to the situation. If you were, for example, a 17-year-old boy and you spotted your friend, you would say hi. On the other hand, if you were the same boy and saw the school principal, of course, you are not going to say hi, you say good morning, sir. So here we have a definite choice of words according to the audience, according to the situation. So sociolinguistics is exactly the study how social factors impact the way we use language. Sociolinguists are interested in the variations within language that arise due to the influence of social factors. Here we have to take into consideration the age, the gender, race, geographical location, and occupation. So it's good to know how to use the language for communication, but it's good also to take into consideration sociolinguistic factors to choose the appropriate words to be used with the audience in certain situations. Okay, and of course, here you have to know the register, formality of language, how to use the words, for example, the words used in business sector, different from that in engineering and so on. Okay. All in all, communicative competence is used to refer to the ability not only to apply the grammatical rules of a language to form correct utterances, but also to use the utterances properly. Here I have to mention that communicative competence is coined with language proficiency. We have to keep in mind that the term communicative competence is comprised of two words, the combination of which means competence to communicate. As for the last section in my presentation, which is components of communicative competence, now I'm going to start with the first one, grammatical competence. What is grammatical competence? From the name grammatical, so it means that I have to know, or it's the ability to create grammatically correct utterances. This involves knowledge of the grammar, vocabulary, and syntax of the language. the ability to produce and comprehend grammatically correct sentences. So, grammatical competence is related to words and rules. Here, most learners will ask this question: why do we need to study grammar if I want only to speak the language? Okay, so of course, learning grammar is very important because it is the use. Because when we learn, it is to use the language without making mistakes. It is important for communication in real life situations. So, if you learn any language, you have to gain mastery of the linguistic code, which includes knowledge of vocabulary, knowledge of grammar. So, when I say knowledge of grammar, you have to focus on morphological rules, syntactic rules, and so on. Okay, so you know syntax, I mentioned it before, sentence structure, you have to know phonology, sound formation to lead to words, to also stress intonation, morphology, word formation, semantics, and so on. For example, if I want to know a certain language, I have to know its structure, its rules, including syntactic, grammar, semantic, the meaning, and morphological, meaning word formation features. Let me explain each feature separately. Syntactic features, this includes knowledge of word order, sentence structure, parts of speech, and grammatical relationships between words. You know, in English, we put SVO. We follow this order in a sentence: subject, verb, object. Maybe in different languages, we have different order. Semantic structure involves semantic structures involve the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences in a language. For example, if I have the words run, fast, dog, so I have to know how to put them in a certain structure to convey the intended meaning. Morphemes are the smallest units of meaning in language, and you have to know the roots and affixes in order to understand the meanings of the words. Okay, so this is concerning grammatical competence. Now, the second point I'm going to refer to is about sociolinguistic competence. Sociolinguistic competence, which Himes focuses a lot on it, it's the accuracy of using the language. It's noted that socio refers to society. Linguistics refers to knowledge of language. So, when I know language, I have to know where I'm going to use the language, with whom I'm going to speak the language, in which situations, in which context. So, sociolinguistic competence refers to understanding both the social and cultural norms that govern the language used, including the registers, variations, the context, the audience, relationship between speakers, and so on. So, sociolinguistic competence depends on two components: society and the person you are talking to, the prestige, the level, and so on, plus the techniques you depend on to communicate with that person. So, you have to remember what kind of language I'm going to use with this person. Is it formal or informal? And so on. So, sociolinguistic competence refers to knowledge and skills for correct language use in a social context. For example, politeness strategies in conversation. In social gathering, participants may employ different politeness strategies depending on the relationship with each other. For instance, you might use definite terms to make requests, to introduce a person, to say Mr., Mrs., Doctor, and so on. Language elements that mark social relationships, friendship or not. You have to know the words used for appropriate behavior. You have to know the culture of the place you are going to speak the language in. Okay, so all of these are very important. You have to, when you are going to use a language, you have to say, you have to be, let's say, you have to concentrate on what you say, how you say, to whom you are talking, and so on. So we finished grammatical competence. Number 2, discourse competence, and we still have one, which is, we finished grammatical competence, sociolinguistic competence, we still have discourse competence and strategic competence. As for discourse competence, we have to remember 2 terms, cohesion and coherence. We cannot teach or learn the language without depending on discourse competence. Canelli described discourse competence as, number 1, the mastery of rules that determine ways in which forms and meanings are combined to achieve a meaningful unity of spoken or written text. That is how texts are developed as a consequence of the combination of a grammar and meaning. The second point, how to connect sentences coherently. So in discourse competence, there is a focus on cohesion and coherence as they are the key terms. For example, when you speak or write, you have to make good sentences. All sentences should be written in a cohesive way. That is, you have to look at the topic sentence, supporting ideas, how to link them together, what kind of cohesive devices you are going to use. Okay, you can use transitions, synonyms, pronouns, and so on. So cohesion is achieved by the use of cohesion devices, pronouns, conjunctions, synonyms, structure, adverbial phrases, etc. in order to link our sentences and utterances and to become meaningful. As for coherence in discourse competence, it's very important because it gives a clear and logical flow of ideas. It maintains focus on the main topic without straying into irrelevant details. So it's related more to the structure of a piece of writing, where to put the topic sentence, relevant ideas, supporting sentences, concluding sentence, and so on. Now, the last component in my presentation is strategic competence. It is the correct use of communication strategies. Like you know, some learners will have some difficulties during their communication. So they have to depend on several strategies to solve their problems of communication. Here, strategic competence refers to the ability to effectively use communication strategies to overcome communication barriers and achieve communication goals. It involves selecting and implementing appropriate techniques to enhance communication effectiveness in various contexts. So strategic competence and speaking skill is composed of knowledge of verbal communication, the choice of the words, the register, the tone, and nonverbal communication strategies, body language here, to be recalled to compensate for breakdowns in communication. So when you have a problem in communicating, so remember to use effective strategies related to verbal communication and nonverbal communication. So speakers have to depend on paralinguistic features such as body language, gestures, facial expressions, the tone, and pitch of voice. They are important since they can exchange the messages completely. So it's important to mention breakdown as a problem or malfunction in the flow of communication, such as not being able to remember an idea or a grammatical form when speaking with someone or when writing something. Here are examples of different types of barriers to effective communication, and I present also certain solutions if applicable. In speaking skill, okay. First, language barrier here. Differences in language proficiency among team members can hinder clear communication. For example, limited vocabulary. This makes it difficult for learners to find the right words to express their thoughts and ideas. While you are speaking with someone, sometimes you say, "Oh, I forgot the word. What am I going to say?" This is a basic problem, and this problem will hinder the process of communication. Also, grammar knowledge. Limited knowledge of rules and structures in L2 can hinder learners' ability to form correct sentences. That's why we focused before on knowledge of grammar rules of the language. You cannot construct correct sentences. Solution: provide language training sessions. Encourage the use of simple and concise language and promote a culture of patience and understanding. So the listener has to accept your ideas, has to wait for you in order to find the correct words. Second point, cultural barriers. Different cultural backgrounds can lead to misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and clashes in communication styles and norms. Solution: foster cultural awareness through training sessions. Encourage open mindedness and curiosity about different cultural practices. Establish clear communication guidelines. It's important to know the culture of the country where you are going to speak the language in order to avoid problems. Third point, technological barriers for online seminars, sessions, meetings. So, problems with technology, such as poor internet connectivity and malfunctioning equipment, can disrupt communication channels. Solution: find different platforms or use different technical support in order to avoid, if possible, to avoid such problems. Fourth barrier, psychological barrier. Psychological factors here, such as anxiety, active communication. And also, we can put it in the category of lack of confidence, as fear of mistakes or being judged by others can lead to a lack of confidence when speaking the second language. This fear may cause learners to hesitate or avoid speaking. Solution: practice, practice, practice. Also, create a supportive environment where team members feel comfortable expressing themselves, offer opportunities for team building, provide constructive feedback and encouragement, and offer resources for stress management. Another barrier, environmental one: distractions, noise, physical barriers in the workplace can interfere with communication. Solution: find quiet areas or provide noise canceling headphones for focused work. Establish clear communication protocols for virtual meetings during important discussions. Now, the last point, linguistic barriers. Of course, sometimes while speaking, as I said it before, you forgot the appropriate word, you forgot a rule, etc. Some solutions, you can, let's say I forgot a certain word to say it in another language. I forgot, for example, how to say kitchen in another language. You can depend on circumlocution. And instead of using kitchen, I forgot the word, I'm going to use it's the place where food is cooked, for example. Or you can depend on guessing. You can ask someone to help you. Okay, so you have to use many strategies in order to overcome such barriers. That's it. Finally, I'd like to express my gratitude to each one of you for giving me your attention, your time and interest.
Yes, I'm here. I just want to ask one question. Okay, I'm just saying the talk was wonderful, excellent. I enjoyed everything. But one thing I want to add is that
I am in.
yeah, as social conversation comes, we have to add that the listening is also very important. If we listen others, then we can communicate much better without jumping our own point. Otherwise, the conversation is excellent. The speaker was beautiful. I enjoyed everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening, Dr. Bedkar, sir, Principal, sir. And I think the time is 6 o'clock at your place also, Lebanon. So, good evening to you also, ma'am. Really wonderful presentation you have made. And it is, it is always, very nice to know about communication, because most of the things, happens in a business, in a practice, in clinic. I'm a medical doctor, so I have to communicate with my patient. It is not just a business of a medicine, but I have to convince, counsel them. I have to, sometimes I have to push them for something, and it requires a kind of a good communication. So what you have mentioned about the sentences, syntax, and for morphemes, the small, affix and suffix, and all these things are very, very necessary and important. Yeah, and another thing, what you said, you should know your audience. Because if I'm sitting in an audience, a layman, and then I'm talking medical terminology in front of them, they don't know about it. So it is very necessary what language I'm putting in front of them. And that, I had to go to up to their level of language. I had to understand their language. And I think, we should talk in their language. In India, there are so many languages, and there are so many variations with the languages also. So we have to understand it better. And I think once we get that kind of tone and note, so naturally we can communicate better. I remember one of the occasion where, one person was giving some shlokas, and we were sitting in front of villagers. So that Sanskrit was not reaching up to the people. They were just they were listener, but they were not understanding what the person is saying. So I think we have to go with their own language, what you said correctly. So that is wonderful. And verbal competency and non-verbal competency, sometimes, I get some foreign language patients, like, I got a Uzbeki person, and it has, the language was one of the biggest barrier. What he was saying and what I was listening, we were not getting each other. But once he started with the non-verbal communication, pointing out where is the pain, what kind of complaints, I think, half hour, more than half hour, I could recognize what kind of complaint he's having, and I could prescribe. So non-verbal communication is also a very, very strong meaning. I think the mothers are wonderful in the non-verbal communication in front of the guest to her children. So that is a beautiful non-verbal communication. So yes, definitely the communication barriers are also there. Many of the times the people are having some preoccupied thoughts or wrong notions in their mind. and the communication, really it doesn't take place then. So in such a situation, counseling them, consulting them, the consultation means both the side we have to ask questions, they will give answer. It becomes little difficult. So what do you think about this? Thank you. Otherwise, your presentation was very, very nice. You have touched all the points, important points. I'm not a person from the literature, but yeah, I could understand what you are saying. So that is the beauty of your speech today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your feedback. I really enjoyed listening to you. Okay, so as I understood, you are asking me, there are certain problems in communication. Your patients don't understand certain jargon words or technical words. It's normal. And in order to avoid such problems, you can use easier terms, easier words, so they can understand them, especially when we say technical words, because not all people can understand technical words in any sector. It's very difficult. So we use the easy words to be understood. And of course, as you said, we depend on paralinguistic features, and you focused on nonverbal communication. This is very important. When they signal where the pain is, etc., you can recognize the problem or the symptoms quickly.
Yeah, when we are palpating the abdomen, we don't ask the question, to the patient. We see the grimaces of the patient, the facial expression of the patient, and we realize, having more pain over here. But my another question was there, ma'am. If suppose the person is having some kind of preoccupied thoughts, they are not accepting what we are doing a communication. So sometimes, that communication barrier becomes very strong over there. So our consultation and counseling, we are doing to the level, not to eat this food, not to eat this kind of food. So restrictions we are giving, but people are having their own thoughts and they are not admitting and they are not accepting. It is not a very easy job. The doctor's job become very difficult, when we tell them you're having cardiac problem, not to have more fats and not to have this. But the people are not accepting it, because they say that this is my something, a staple food or something like that, native food. I cannot leave that. So in such instances, the communication barrier develops. So what we can do in such instances, to what level we can go with, and how we can solve this kind of complaints?
Yeah, I know. I do understand that depending on your major, as a doctor, trying to convince your patients, and there are certain barriers, not all patients are going to accept certain solutions, but slowly, a bit, maybe you are going to have certain influence on your patients, your techniques, your methods, or the strategies you are going to use, your communications. Sometimes you can reach the communication by using, depending on a sense of humor, you give them funny examples. You have many ways, because you are speaking about medicine. I know it's very difficult for them. If you ask me about education, etc., I will give you different solutions. But for medicine, you are an expert in the field and you have to try many techniques. But I think you can find a way.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I think the word is reinforcement, the constant hammering, and they will accept someday. Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am, for your presentation and explanation also. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Dr. May. This was really insightful and important session. I enjoyed every bit of information shared concerning what you have explained related to the skills. I guess that these skills are important for future success for our children and our students in their coming days. So do you think that a syllabus which is entitled by communicative competence and performance should be integrated into our classrooms?
Thank you, Nadine. Thanks for your feedback. Of course, we have to focus on communicative competence in our classes. In all the skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we have to find certain techniques to reinforce communication skills among our students. For example, we can ask our students to work on role plays, listen to podcasts, watch movies, to work on group work in order to share ideas together, to encourage them to communicate. You can give them list of vocabulary words according to a certain situation. For example, if they want to go to supermarket, what kind of words they have to use. So in this way, you are going to teach your students how to use the language in real life situations. You give them examples from different areas, how to communicate with people in supermarket, how to communicate with people, how to communicate with doctors in hospitals, for example, if they are in advanced level. So you can work on this. Yes, absolutely. Thank you,
Thank
Nadine.
you.
Thanks.
You.
I just want to comment. It's not a question, it's a comment that the conversation we do with the people, whether we are teaching, whether we are socializing, or whether we are walking, our words and our facial expression must match. Coordination of both things, people get impression, mean to say they understand that we mean what we are saying. We have to be natural, and our facial expression should be matching with our hand and with our words. Otherwise, the conversation and the speech was wonderful, very educated, and we appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. She is muted. Yeah, muted.
Technical communication barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the problem. I faced it also. Abs- Thanks, Doctor. It's my pleasure to be with you. I really enjoyed giving the presentation, and I am honored to be with doctors, educated people. And I would like to say thanks to my students from English department. They are working on their theses, masters, and their PhD dissertations, and they are excellent students. So maybe also they are going to give presentations if you like, because their level is very high and they can express their ideas freely and fluently. They are experts in giving presentations as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. May. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. May.
Thank you, Ma.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I would like to say something if possible. Yeah, hello, I'm Dr. May's student, and I'm very proud to see my doctor having such achievements. She is really wonderful. She is much more wonderful than you can see her today. We are very glad to have such a professor. Thank you all, and thank you, Dr. May.
Thank you, my dear. Thanks to all.
Goodbye.
Thanks. Am I going to leave? Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
थैंक यू सर. प्रशांत सर आज नहीं थे क्या सर? सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है. सर आपके माइक म्यूट है.